I never told my daughter what I kept in that rusted warehouse in downtown Seattle. She thought it was just a pile of junk left over from a failed mechanic shop, a burden I was too stubborn to sell. When she married a man who looked at my calloused hands with disgust, I made sure he would never find the key. I was sitting on my porch, nursing a cheap beer and enjoying the silence when my phone buzzed. It was Sarge, the old veteran I hired to watch the perimeter. His voice was tight. "Cliff, your son-in-law is here. He is at the north gate. He brought 2 guys with him, and he has got a pair of bolt cutters." I sat up straight, the beer forgotten. I looked at the live feed on my tablet. There he was, Tyler, sweating in his designer suit, struggling with the heavy iron chain. Sarge asked if he should call the cops. I took a sip of beer and smiled for the first time in weeks. "No, Sarge. Let him cut it. Breaking and entering is a state crime. But breaking into a defense contractor storage facility is a federal offense. I want him to cross that line." Before I tell you how I dismantled his life piece by piece, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to someone who mistook your silence for weakness. My name is Cliff Dalton. I am 69 years old, and to the world, I am just a retired grease monkey living on Social Security. I drive a dented 2005 Ford F-150, and I wear flannel shirts that have seen better decades. People look at me and see a man who lost. They do not see the man who owns the patent for the hydraulic coupling system used in half the commercial aircraft in this country. They do not see the $12 million land deed sitting in my safe. I keep my circle small and my mouth shut. That was how I survived the business world, and that was how I intended to survive retirement. But then my daughter Megan brought Tyler Reed home. It started 3 months ago with a dinner that was supposed to be a celebration. Megan told me she had met someone special, someone with vision. I expected a man who knew the value of hard work. Instead, I got a 30-year-old child wearing a suit that was too tight and shoes that cost more than my first car. Tyler walked into my house like he was doing me a favor. He looked around my living room, his eyes lingering on the faded wallpaper and the oil stains on my work boots by the door. He didn't offer a handshake. He offered a nod, the kind a king gives to a peasant. "Nice place, Cliff," he said, his voice dripping with fake politeness. "Very rustic. It has a real blue-collar charm." I ignored the jab and motioned for them to sit. I had spent all afternoon cooking a pot roast the way my late wife used to make. Tyler poked at the meat with his fork like he was dissecting a biology experiment. He asked if the beef was grass-fed. I told him it was beef-fed. He didn't laugh. He pushed the plate away and started talking. He didn't talk about family or his background. He talked about leverage. He talked about scaling operations and blockchain integration. He used a lot of words to say absolutely nothing. "So Cliff, Megan tells me you used to be a mechanic," Tyler said, swirling the glass of tap water I gave him because he refused my beer. "That is honorable work. Dirty but honorable. I bet you are glad to be done with it. Your back must be killing you after years of sliding under cars for minimum wage." I cut a piece of meat and looked him in the eye. "I owned a specialized repair shop, Tyler. We focused on industrial machinery. It paid the bills." Tyler smirked. "Right. A shop. Well, the world is changing. Manual labor is for the past. The future is digital. I am currently the CEO of a fintech startup. We are revolutionizing the way people perceive asset liquidity." I asked him what his company actually did. He blinked. "We facilitate peer-to-peer microlending through decentralized networks." I asked him if he made a profit. He laughed, a high-pitched sound that grated on my nerves. "Profit is a legacy metric, Cliff. We are in the growth phase. We are pre-revenue, but our valuation is skyrocketing." I knew then exactly what he was. I had seen 100 men like him in the 70s and 80s, men who sold snake oil and called it medicine. Now they just called it crypto. Then came the pitch. I knew it was coming. Men like Tyler do not date girls like Megan because of her heart. They date her because they smell opportunity. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on my table. Look, Cliff, I want to be frank with you. Megan and I are getting married. We are going to build an empire. But to build you need capital. Megan mentioned you own this house outright. It is a nice asset, but it is dead capital. It is just sitting here rotting. I can help you unlock its potential. I stopped eating. I put my fork down slowly. Unlock its potential, I repeated. Yes, Tyler said, his eyes lighting up. We can take out a line of credit against the equity. You invest that into my seed round. I can guarantee you a 300% return in the first year. You could move out of this drafty old place. Get a nice condo in the city. Something with maintenance included. You would not have to scrub oil off your hands anymore. I looked at Megan. She was biting her lip, looking at her lap. She knew. She knew this was an insult, but she was too in love to stop him. I looked back at Tyler. This house is not an asset, Tyler. It is my home. My wife died in that bedroom. I raised my daughter in this kitchen. It is not for sale, and it is certainly not collateral for your imaginary internet money. Tyler's smile faltered. He sat back, crossing his arms. I am just trying to help you, Cliff. You are sitting on a gold mine, and you are treating it like a dirt pile. It is a scarcity mindset. That is why you are where you are, and I am where I am. I took a sip of my beer. And where are you, Tyler? Last I checked, you are eating my pot roast in my house because you cannot afford to take my daughter to a restaurant. The dinner ended in silence. Tyler left without saying goodbye. Megan whispered a quick apology and followed him. I watched them drive away in a Tesla that I noticed had a rental barcode sticker on the side window. I thought that was the end of it. I thought Megan would see through him. I was wrong. Love makes smart people do stupid things. They got married a month later at the courthouse. I was not invited. Megan sent me a text message saying they wanted something private just for special people. It hurt, but I didn't let it show. I went to my workshop and restored a carburetor from a 1969 Triumph. Metal doesn't lie to you. Metal doesn't betray you. A month after the wedding, on a rainy Tuesday night, headlights flashed through my living room window. I looked out to see the rental Tesla and a moving truck parked in my driveway. I opened the door to find Megan standing in the rain, shivering. Tyler was behind her, shouting at the truck driver. Dad. Megan said, her voice trembling. Can we come in? I stepped aside. I didn't ask why. I knew why. They dragged 6 suitcases into my hallway. Tyler walked in, shaking the rain off his coat onto my hardwood floor. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked annoyed. This is ridiculous, he muttered. I am going to sue that contractor. He looked at me. Cliff, we have a situation. The penthouse we bought downtown. The custom marble flooring from Italy got delayed at customs. The place is uninhabitable. We need a place to crash for a few weeks until the crew finishes up. I looked at Megan. She couldn't meet my eyes. I knew there was no penthouse. I knew there was no marble. I had run a background check on Tyler the day after the dinner. He had been evicted from his studio apartment 3 days ago. His credit score was lower than my blood pressure. But I didn't say a word. I wanted to see how far he would go. I wanted to see the depth of his delusion. The guest room is upstairs, I said. Tyler scoffed. The guest room. Great. I hope the mattress isn't from the Civil War. That night I lay in bed listening to them argue in the next room. I heard Tyler's voice, muffled but angry. He was blaming Megan for his failures. He was blaming the world. He didn't know that the walls of this house were thin, or maybe he just didn't care. I made a decision then. I would not kick them out. Not yet. I would let him think he was in charge. I would let him think I was a senile old fool. I would give him enough rope to hang himself, and then I would kick the chair away. The invasion began the next morning. I woke up at 5 as I always do to make coffee. The kitchen was a disaster. Dirty dishes were piled in the sink. A half-eaten pizza box was on the counter. My old reliable coffee maker, a machine I had used for 20 years, was unplugged and pushed into a corner. In its place was a shiny, complex espresso machine that looked like a spaceship. Tyler walked in wearing a silk robe. "Good morning, Cliff," he said, yawning. "I moved your dinosaur of a coffee pot. I need real espresso to function. This machine costs $2,000. Don't touch it. You might break the pressure valve." I walked over to the corner, plugged my old machine back in, and started brewing. "I like my coffee black and simple, Tyler. You can keep your spaceship." He rolled his eyes and poured himself a shot of espresso. "Suit yourself. By the way, I need a workspace. The Wi-Fi signal in the guest room is weak. I am going to set up in that room downstairs, the one with the drafting table." My blood ran cold. That was my office. That was where I kept the blueprints for the Mk4 hydraulic system. That was where I kept the framed patent certificates and the photos of my wife. "No," I said. "That room is private." Tyler laughed. "Private. Cliff, it is full of dusty paper. I need a command center. I have conference calls with investors in Tokyo and London. I need professional surroundings. I already moved some of your boxes to the garage." I put my coffee mug down. I walked past him down the hall to my office. The door was open. My desk, a solid oak piece my father built, was covered in Tyler's monitors and tangled wires. My drafting tools were swept into a cardboard box on the floor. But what stopped my heart was the recycling bin. It was full. I reached in and pulled out a roll of blue paper. It was the original schematic for the variable pressure valve, the invention that paid for this house and Megan's college tuition. It was hand-drawn, signed by me and my late partner. It was irreplaceable. Tyler appeared in the doorway, sipping his espresso. "Oh, that," he said. "Yeah, I cleared out the clutter. You cannot have a high-performance workspace with old trash lying around. It is feng shui, Cliff. You have to clear the old to make room for the new." I held the blueprint in my hands. The paper was crinkled. I smoothed it out carefully, feeling the texture of the ink. I turned to look at him. "This is not trash, Tyler. This is a patent." Tyler snorted. "A patent for what? A better way to change a tire?" "Cliff, listen to me. Nobody uses paper anymore. Everything is cloud-based. I did you a favor. Now the room has energy. It breathes." I walked over to him. He was 3 inches taller than me, but he flinched when I got close. I did not raise my voice. I did not shout. I spoke in the voice I used when a mechanic stripped a bolt on a critical engine block. "Get your things out. Now." Tyler stepped back, his face flushing red. "You are being unreasonable. Megan lives here too. This is her house too. I have rights." I stepped forward again. "You have 10 minutes. If your computer is still on my desk in 11 minutes, it goes through the window." Tyler stared at me, trying to find some weakness, some hesitation. He found none. He cursed under his breath and started unplugging his monitors. I gathered my blueprints from the trash. I took every single piece of paper, every notebook, every pencil. I carried them to my bedroom and locked the door. I installed a heavy-duty deadbolt on my bedroom door that afternoon. When Megan came home from her part-time job, Tyler spun a story about how I had threatened him, how I was hostile and senile. He told her I was hoarding trash and screaming at him for trying to clean up. Megan came to my room, knocking softly. "Dad," she said, "Tyler is just trying to help. He says you were yelling at him over some old papers. Maybe we should talk to a doctor about your memory." I looked at my daughter. She looked tired. She had dark circles under her eyes. She was working double shifts to support a man who spent his day playing CEO in my living room. I wanted to shake her. I wanted to show her the bank accounts, the deeds, the truth. But she wasn't ready. If I told her now, Tyler would just twist it. He would say I was hiding money from them. He would guilt her into demanding access. No. She had to see him for what he was. She had to see him fail. "I am fine, Megan," I said through the door. "I just want my privacy. Tell your husband that the office is off limits. If he wants a command center, he can use the dining table. Or the library." Tyler did not use the library. He spent the next week sulking on the sofa watching TV and talking loudly on his phone about millions of dollars that didn't exist. He started treating me like a ghost in my own house. If I walked into the kitchen, he would stop talking. If I sat on the porch, he would close the blinds. But I watched. I listened. I saw the late-night notices arriving in the mail. Final notice. Collection agency. Past due. He was hiding them from Megan, stuffing them into his pockets as soon as the mailman arrived. The tension in the house was a physical weight. It was like the air before a thunderstorm. I knew the lightning was coming. I just didn't know where it would strike. I kept my routine. I woke up early, fixed things around the house, and spent my evenings checking the security logs of my warehouse downtown. That warehouse was my fortress. It held the heavy machinery from my company, the prototypes, the legacy of 40 years of innovation. It sat on a plot of land that the city council had just rezoned for a massive tech corridor. The value had tripled overnight. Only I knew that. And my lawyer. But secrets have a way of leaking out when you live with a rat. A week later, a letter arrived. It was a property tax assessment. Usually these went to my P.O. box, but the city clerk had made a clerical error and sent it to my residential address. The envelope was addressed to Dalton Industrial Holdings, care of Cliff Dalton. I was out getting parts for the truck when it arrived. When I got home, I saw the envelope on the kitchen counter. It had been opened. Tyler was sitting at the table, his laptop open. He was looking at a satellite map on the screen. He looked up at me and his expression had changed. The disdain was gone, replaced by a hungry, predatory look that made my skin crawl. He held up the letter. "Cliff," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. "You never told me you owned a commercial warehouse in the Arts District. Do you have any idea what this is worth?" I snatched the letter from his hand. "It is a storage unit, Tyler. It is full of rusty junk. Do not touch my mail again. That is a felony." Tyler stood up. He walked around the table, blocking my path. "Rusty junk," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "Cliff, I just looked up the zoning. This isn't storage. This is a development site. This is $12 million of prime real estate. And you are sitting on it. Why? Why are you living here driving that truck when you have this?" I put the letter in my pocket. "Because it is none of your business. Get out of my way." Tyler stepped aside, but his eyes followed me. They were calculating. He was doing the math. He wasn't seeing a warehouse. He was seeing his debt disappear. He was seeing his startup funded. He was seeing a way out of the hole he had dug for himself. That night, the dynamic changed. Tyler stopped being hostile. He became helpful. He offered to do the dishes. He asked me about my day. He started asking questions about the warehouse. Was it secure? Did I go there often? What was inside? I gave him vague answers. Just old machines, lathes, presses, scrap metal, nothing of value. He nodded, but I could see the gears turning in his head. He didn't believe me. He thought I was hoarding gold bars or classic cars. He thought I was a dragon sitting on a pile of treasure. 2 days later, the gaslighting began. I woke up feeling groggy, my head spinning. I stumbled to the kitchen. Tyler was there pouring coffee. "Here, Cliff," he said, handing me a mug. "You look tired. Drink this." I took a sip. It tasted bitter, more bitter than usual. I assumed it was just his fancy beans. I sat down and my eyelids felt heavy. I fell asleep at the table. When I woke up, Megan was standing over me looking terrified. Dad, she said. Dad, wake up. Tyler says you left the gas stove on. The whole house smells like gas. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog. What? No, I didn't touch the stove. Tyler was standing behind her, shaking his head sadly. He did, Megan. I walked in and the burners were full blast. He was just sitting there asleep. He didn't even smell it. I think his mind is going. I looked at the stove. It was off now. I looked at Tyler. He was looking at me with fake concern, but his eyes were cold. He had turned the gas on. He had drugged me. I stood up, gripping the table for support. I am not senile, I growled. You did this. Megan looked at me, tears in her eyes. Dad, stop. Tyler saved us. You could have blown up the house. Please. Maybe you need to see a specialist. I saw the trap snapping shut. If he could prove I was incompetent, if he could get Megan to sign a power of attorney, he could get control of my assets. He could get the warehouse. I realized then that this wasn't just a nuisance. This was a war. I had to fight back. But I couldn't fight him with anger. I had to fight him with strategy. I had to be the mechanic. I had to diagnose the problem, isolate the fault, and repair it by removing the defective part. I decided to play along. I let my shoulders slump. I let my voice tremble. Maybe I am tired, I muttered. I have been forgetting things lately. Tyler's eyes lit up. See, Megan. He admits it. We need to help him. We need to take the burden of managing his affairs off his shoulders. I need to take a look at his portfolio, make sure everything is secure. I shuffled back to my room, acting the part of the defeated old man. But the moment I closed the locked door, I pulled out my burner phone. I called Sarge. I called my lawyer. I told them to get ready. The rat was hungry. It was time to put out the cheese. The next morning, I went to the garage. I have a Vincent Black Shadow, a motorcycle from 1950. It is the holy grail of bikes. To the untrained eye, it looks like a rusted heap of black metal. To a collector, it is worth 6 figures. I had it on the lift, dismantling the engine. Tyler walked in. He didn't knock. He looked at the bike with a sneer. Still playing with toys, Cliff, he asked. Listen, I have been thinking. That warehouse. If you are having trouble remembering things, maybe you forgot what is in there. Maybe we should go take an inventory. Together. I kept working on the engine. I don't need help, Tyler. Stay away from there. It is dangerous. He kicked the tire of the bike. The bike wobbled on the lift. My heart skipped a beat. Careful, I warned. That is a piece of history. Tyler laughed. It is junk. Just like you. You are a hoarder, Cliff. You hold on to garbage because you are afraid of the future. You know what? I bet that warehouse is empty. I bet you are just lying to make yourself feel important. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of my coffee. But I am going to find out. And when I do, I am going to make sure Megan knows that her father is sitting on a fortune while she scrubs floors. I am going to sell that place, Cliff. And I am going to put you in a home where you can sleep all day and not burn the house down. He turned and walked out. I watched him go. He had just declared his intent. He was going to go to the warehouse. He was going to try to break in. I wiped the grease off my hands with a rag. I looked at the Vincent. It wasn't junk. It was a masterpiece waiting to be assembled. Just like my plan. I walked into the house. I went to the kitchen counter where I kept my keys. I had a large ring of keys, and one of them was a large brass key labeled Main Gate. I took it off the ring. I replaced it with a similar-looking key from an old padlock I threw away 10 years ago. I left the keys on the counter right next to the fruit bowl. Then I went to the living room and turned on the TV loud. I waited. 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps in the kitchen. The jingle of keys. Then the front door opened and closed. I walked to the window. Tyler was walking to his rental car. He was walking fast. He had the keys. He pulled his phone out and made a call. I couldn't hear him, but I could read his body language. He was excited. He was calling his crew. I waited until his car disappeared around the corner. Then I picked up my phone. "Sarge," I said. "He is coming. Get the cameras rolling and call the police." "But not yet. Wait until he cuts the chain. I want him inside. I want him to see what is in there." I sat back on the porch and opened a beer. I took a long sip. The sun was setting over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. It was a beautiful evening for justice. I imagined Tyler driving through the city, his heart pounding with greed. I imagined him pulling up to the warehouse thinking he had won. I imagined the look on his face when he realized that the key didn't work. And now here we are. The phone in my hand is showing the live feed. The bolt cutters are snapping through the iron links. Clang. The chain falls. Tyler pushes the gate open. He waves his two friends forward. They are high-fiving. They think they just cracked the vault. They have no idea they just walked into a federal prison sentence. I finish my beer. I stand up and grab my jacket. It is time to go down there. It is time to introduce my son-in-law to the reality of the situation. It is time to show him that the rusty fortress he wanted to plunder is actually a trap designed specifically for rats like him. I walk to my truck. The engine roars to life, a deep, guttural sound that vibrates in my chest. I am coming, Tyler, and I am bringing the truth with me. The war for my dignity did not begin with a shout. It began with the ripping of an envelope. In the state of Washington, tampering with someone else's mail is a federal crime punishable by up to 5 years in prison. But to a man like Tyler, laws were just suggestions for poor people, inconveniences that did not apply to visionaries like himself. I had gone out that morning to the hardware store to buy a specific set of gaskets for the Vincent engine. It was my excuse to leave the house to escape the suffocating presence of a son-in-law who treated my living room like his personal boardroom. When I returned, the atmosphere in the kitchen had changed. It wasn't tense anymore. It was electric. Tyler was sitting at the kitchen table, but he wasn't looking at his phone or screaming at his virtual assistant. He was staring at a piece of paper. Beside him, Megan was pacing back and forth, her hands clasped together, looking terrified and excited at the same time. As I walked in, the heavy smell of ozone and burnt coffee hung in the air. I placed my bag of gaskets on the counter. Tyler looked up. His eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. It was the look of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. "Cliff," he said, his voice unusually soft. "Sit down. We need to have a serious conversation." I looked at the table. There, lying open, was a government envelope. The return address was the King County Department of Assessments. It was addressed to Dalton Industrial Holdings, care of Cliff Dalton. A clerical error at the tax office had sent it here instead of my P.O. box, and Tyler the Vulture had intercepted it. "You opened my mail," I said, my voice low. "That is a felony, Tyler." He waved his hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "Don't give me that legal nonsense." This looked official. I thought it was a lien on the house. I was trying to protect Megan. But then I opened it. He picked up the document, his fingers trembling slightly. He wasn't trembling from fear. He was trembling from greed. "Do you know what this is, Cliff?" he asked. I walked over and snatched the paper from his hand. "It is a property tax assessment for a storage unit I own. It is none of your business." Tyler stood up slowly. "A storage unit. Is that what you call it?" He laughed, a dry, incredulous sound. He turned his laptop around so I could see the screen. He had Google Earth open. On the screen was a satellite view of downtown Seattle, specifically the Sodo district. Right there in the middle of the screen was a large gray rectangular building with a fenced perimeter. It was my warehouse. But Tyler wasn't looking at the rust on the roof. He was looking at what surrounded it. To the left was a new glass-walled tech campus. To the right was a luxury loft complex, where a one-bedroom apartment cost more than my entire life savings. My warehouse sat there like a stubborn old rock in a stream of gentrification. I looked up the zoning cliff, Tyler said, pointing at the screen. This isn't industrial wasteland anymore. This is designated mixed-use commercial. Do you have any idea what the price per square foot is in this zip code? I stayed silent. I knew exactly what it was worth. I had received offers every month for the past 5 years. Developers, sharks, foreign investors. I had shredded every letter. Tyler leaned in close, his breath hot on my face. $12 million, Cliff. That is the conservative estimate for the land alone. $12 million. He said each word separately, as if he were tasting them. And you are using it to store what, old car parts, broken tools? Megan stopped pacing and looked at me. Dad, is it true? Do you really own that building? I looked at my daughter. I saw the hope in her eyes, but it wasn't her hope. It was his. She was imagining a life without debt, a life without Tyler's constant panic over money. She was imagining peace. She didn't realize that giving a man like Tyler $12 million was like giving a pyromaniac a flamethrower. It is a warehouse, Megan, I said firmly. It is where I keep the inventory for my business. It is not liquid cash. It is a working facility. Tyler slammed his hand on the table. Business. What business? Cliff, you are a retired mechanic. You fix motorcycles in your garage. You are sitting on a lottery ticket, and you are too stubborn to cash it in because you have some sentimental attachment to a pile of rusty bricks. He began to pace the room, his energy manic. Do you realize what we could do with that capital? We could seed my company. We could buy a house in Medina. We could travel. You could stop wearing those flannel shirts and actually live like a human being. He turned to me, his face twisted in a mask of frustration. Why are you hiding this? Were you just going to let it rot until you died? I looked him dead in the eye. It is not for sale, Tyler. Not now. Not ever. It is part of a trust. Tyler froze. A trust? You have a trust, I lied. There was no trust yet, but I knew the word would scare him. It implied lawyers. It implied ironclad legal protections. Yes, I said. It is locked up. It generates income when I need it, but the principal asset cannot be touched. Tyler stared at me for a long moment, his mind racing. He was looking for a crack in the armor. He was looking for a lie. He didn't believe me. He couldn't conceive of a world where someone would choose to hold on to a dusty building instead of chasing the quick payout. To him, assets existed only to be liquidated. Fine, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Fine. It is in a trust. Show me the paperwork. I want to see the deed. I want to see the terms. If you are telling the truth, show me the documents. I picked up the tax assessment from the table and folded it neatly. I don't have to show you anything, Tyler. This is my house. That is my property. And you are a guest here. A guest who just committed a federal crime. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I felt his eyes boring into my back. I knew this wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. Before today, Tyler thought I was just a nuisance, a senile old man taking up space. Now he saw me as the obstacle. I was the dragon guarding the cave, and Tyler needed that gold. I went to my room and locked the deadbolt. I could hear them whispering in the kitchen. I could hear Megan crying softly, and Tyler's voice low and urgent, comforting her. But he wasn't comforting her. He was recruiting her. He was telling her that her father was selfish, that her father didn't care about her future, that her father was holding out on them. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the old photo of my wife on the nightstand. She would have hated this. She would have hated the greed that was poisoning our home. But she would have understood why I had to do what came next. The warehouse wasn't just a building. It was a test. And Tyler had just failed the first question. I knew he wouldn't stop. He had seen the number 12 million. It was burned into his retinas. He would look for the deed. He would look for the keys. He would try to declare me incompetent. The tax letter was the catalyst. It transformed his disdain into desperation. Later that afternoon, I saw him in the backyard on his phone. He wasn't screaming this time. He was speaking quietly, looking over his shoulder. I cracked my window open just an inch. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the body language. He was making deals. He was selling things he didn't own yet. He was promising investors that capital was incoming. He was digging his grave deeper, shovel by shovel. I went to my closet and pulled out a small safe box, hidden under my winter coats. Inside was the real deed to the warehouse, and next to it the patent documents for the hydraulic systems that were still classified by the Department of Defense. Tyler thought he had found a real estate play. He had no idea he was poking a sleeping giant of the defense industry. That evening, the dynamic in the house shifted again. Tyler didn't ask about the warehouse at dinner. He didn't mention the tax letter. He was polite. He poured my water. He asked about the weather. But every time I looked up, I caught him staring at my hands, specifically at my pockets. He was looking for the keys. He had realized that legal threats wouldn't work on me. He had realized that I wouldn't sign. So he had decided to bypass me entirely. He was going to steal it. I finished my meal and stood up. I am going to bed, I announced. I felt tired not from age but from the weight of the charade. As I walked up the stairs, I heard Tyler say to Megan, "Don't worry, babe. I will handle it. Dad just doesn't understand modern finance. We have to do what is best for the family, even if he doesn't agree." I paused on the landing. Handle it. That was the phrase. He was going to handle me. I smiled in the darkness. Good. Let him try. I went into my room and took the key to the warehouse gate off my main ring. I looked at it. It was a heavy, old-fashioned iron key. I put it in my pocket. Then I took the spare key, the one that looked identical but didn't open anything, and placed it on the dresser where I knew he would look if he ever managed to pick my door lock. But I had a better idea. I needed to make it easier for him. I needed to dangle the bait right in front of his nose. I decided that tomorrow I would make a mistake. A calculated, senile mistake. I would leave the keys on the kitchen counter. I would give him the weapon he needed to destroy himself. Because a man who steals mail is a nuisance, but a man who breaks into a secured facility with intent to sell federal property, that is a prisoner. And I was finally ready to be the warden. The battlefield shifted that week. It moved from the dining table and the garage to the chemical composition of my blood. Tyler realized that shouting at me did not work. Threats of legal action did not work. I was a rusted bolt that refused to turn no matter how much leverage he applied. So he decided to dissolve the rust. He decided to make me question the one thing I valued more than my property. My mind. It started with a gesture of kindness that should have been my first warning. For 3 days straight, Tyler insisted on making the morning coffee. He bought a new bag of beans, something dark and oily with a French name I could not pronounce. He claimed it was a peace offering, a way to apologize for the tension over the tax letter. "Cliff," he said, his voice smooth as engine oil. "I know we got off on the wrong foot. Let me serve you for a change. You have worked hard your whole life. Sit down. Relax." I sat. I watched him grind the beans. I watched him pour the water. I did not see him slip anything into the cup, but I should have known better than to trust a man who smiles with his mouth, but not his eyes. The coffee was strong. It had a strange metallic aftertaste that cut through the roast. When I commented on it, Tyler just smiled and said it was the chicory notes. It is an acquired taste, Cliff. Very sophisticated. 20 minutes after that first cup, the world began to swim. It was not a sudden blackout. It was a slow, creeping fog that rolled into my brain. My limbs felt heavy like I was trying to walk underwater. I was sitting in my armchair reading the newspaper when the words started to slide off the page. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, but my eyelids felt like they were made of lead. The next thing I knew, I was jerking awake. The sun had moved across the room. 3 hours had passed. Tyler was sitting across from me watching. He was not reading. He was not on his phone. He was just watching me like a scientist observing a lab rat in a maze. "Good nap, Cliff?" he asked. "You were out cold. You were mumbling about the war. I didn't know you served." I rubbed my face, feeling a sticky sweat on my forehead. "I did not serve in the war, Tyler. I was a mechanic." Tyler frowned, a mask of mock concern. "Really, that is strange. You were talking about airstrikes. Maybe you were dreaming. Or maybe you are confusing memories." That was the first seed, the suggestion that my reality was cracking. Over the next few days, the incidents escalated. I would drink my morning coffee, and by 10 o'clock, I would be losing time. I would find myself standing in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the refrigerator, unable to remember what I came in for. I would wake up in the afternoon to find objects moved. My keys were in the freezer. The TV remote was in the bathroom sink. Tyler was always there to point it out. "Cliff, why are your keys in the ice bucket?" he would ask loud enough for Megan to hear from the other room. I would stare at the keys, my heart pounding. I didn't put them there. I knew I didn't. But the fog in my head made me doubt. Had I? Was I losing it? My father died of Alzheimer's. I watched a brilliant engineer turn into a man who couldn't tie his shoes. Was it my turn? The climax of his campaign came on Thursday. I had finished my coffee and gone to the garage to sort some bolts. The drowsiness hit me harder than usual. I sat down on a stool just for a moment to rest my eyes. When I opened them, the smell of natural gas was choking me. I stumbled up, coughing. The valve on my welding torch was wide open, hissing deadly gas into the enclosed space. I lunged for it, twisting it shut. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the metal. The door to the garage burst open. Tyler and Megan ran in. Tyler grabbed Megan and pulled her back, covering her face. "Oh my God," he screamed. "He left the gas on Cliff. What are you doing? You're going to kill us all." I stood there dizzy and nauseous. "I didn't leave it on," I rasped. "I always check the valves. Always." Megan looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. "Dad," she whispered, "the smell. It is so strong. You were asleep right next to it." Tyler pulled her away, shaking his head. "This is it, Megan. We cannot ignore this anymore. It is dangerous. He is a danger to himself and to us." That night, through the thin walls, I heard the conversation I had been dreading. Tyler was pitching the endgame. Megan was crying. "I am scared, Tyler," she sobbed. "He has never been like this. He is the sharpest man I know." Tyler's voice was low, soothing, and poisonous. "That is how it starts, babe. It is aggressive dementia. The paranoia, the hoarding, the memory gaps. Leaving the gas on, that is a classic symptom. Look, I recorded him today. I didn't want to show you this, but you need to see the reality." I crept to my door and pressed my ear against the wood. I heard a video playing on his phone. It was me. I was slumped in my chair in the living room, mouth open, snoring loudly in the middle of the day. But it was Tyler's voice narrating the video that made my blood boil. "It is 2 p.m. on a Tuesday," he whispered in the recording. "Cliff has passed out again. He was in the middle of a sentence and just shut down. He doesn't know what year it is. He thinks he is still running the shop. It is heartbreaking. I don't know how much longer we can let him live alone." I heard Megan gasp. "Oh, Dad," she wept. "Tyler, What do? We cannot afford a full-time nurse. Tyler sighed, the sound of a man carrying a heavy burden. I know, and we cannot keep him here if he is going to burn the house down. But there is a solution. If we get power of attorney, if we become his legal guardians, we can manage his assets properly. We can sell that old warehouse he is obsessed with. The proceeds would pay for the best care facility in the state, a place where he is safe, where he can't hurt anyone. I sank to the floor. The rage that filled me was cold and sharp. It cut through the chemical fog in my brain. He didn't want to help me. He wanted to lock me away in a home and strip mine my life's work. He wanted to declare me incompetent so he could sign the deed to the warehouse himself. It was brilliant. It was evil. And it was almost working. But he made one mistake. He assumed that because I was old, I was stupid. He assumed that because my body was slowing down, my instincts were gone. He forgot that a mechanic listens to the engine before he takes it apart. And my engine was misfiring every time I drank his coffee. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. The man staring back looked tired, yes, but his eyes were clear. The fog was gone. It only came after the morning cup. I went downstairs. I heard Tyler in the kitchen. The grinder whirred. The smell of brewing coffee filled the air. I walked in, forcing a shuffle in my step, letting my shoulders droop. "Good morning, Tyler," I mumbled. Tyler turned, flashing that predatory smile. "Morning, Cliff. I made your special blend, ready to start the day." He handed me the mug. I took it. My hands trembled not from age, but from the effort of holding back my fist. "Thank you," I said. I think I will go drink this on the porch. Get some fresh air." Tyler nodded encouragingly. "Good idea. Get some sun. It will be good for your bones." I walked out to the porch. I sat on the swing. I checked to make sure the blinds were closed and he couldn't see me. Then I poured the coffee into the hydrangeas bush next to the steps. I watched the dark liquid soak into the dirt. I raised the empty mug to my lips and pretended to sip. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. The fog did not come. The heaviness did not come. My mind stayed sharp as a razor. I looked at the bottom of the mug. There was a white, chalky residue that hadn't fully dissolved. I dipped my pinky finger into it and tasted it. It was bitter, chemical. It tasted like crushed sleeping pills. Benzodiazepines, maybe. Or strong antihistamines. I wiped my finger on my jeans. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My son-in-law was poisoning me. He was drugging me to steal my legacy. A younger man might have stormed into the kitchen and beaten him senseless. A weaker man might have called the police immediately. But I was neither. I was a man who played the long game. If I accused him now, he would deny it. He would say I was paranoid, another symptom of my dementia. He would flush the pills. It would be my word against his, and right now my word was worth nothing because he had spent weeks discrediting me. No. I needed proof. I needed him to think his plan was working. I needed him to get arrogant. I sat there for an hour, letting the anger crystallize into a plan. Then I let my head drop to my chest. I let my mouth hang open. I closed my eyes. I heard the screen door creak open. I smelled his cheap cologne. Cliff, Tyler whispered. "Cliff, you awake?" I didn't move. I kept my breathing shallow and rhythmic. I felt him step closer. I felt him take the empty mug from my hand. "Out like a light," he muttered to himself. He chuckled a low, nasty sound. "Too easy, old man. Too easy." He walked back inside. I heard him dialing his phone. I opened one eye. I could see him through the window. He was pacing the kitchen. "Hey, Dr. Evans. Yeah, it is Tyler Reed, calling about my father-in-law. It is getting worse. He passed out on the porch this morning." Yeah, I think it is time to expedite the competency hearing. We need to get that guardianship signed by Monday. Yes, I will bring the paperwork. He hung up. He pumped his fist in the air. He thought he had won. He thought the finish line was in sight. He didn't know that he had just crossed the starting line of his own destruction. I sat up. I looked at the hydrangeas. The flowers were already starting to wilt where I had poured the poison. I felt a pang of pity for the plant, but it was a necessary sacrifice. I stood up, no longer shuffling. I walked to my truck, grabbing my keys. I needed to see my lawyer. I needed a toxicology screen at a private lab. And I needed to prepare the warehouse. Tyler wanted a senile old man. I would give him one. I would play the part so well he would hand me the shovel to dig his grave. He wanted to sell the warehouse. I would make sure he got inside. I would make sure he felt the cold steel of reality before the handcuffs clicked shut. I started the truck. The engine roared, strong and reliable, just like me. I backed out of the driveway, leaving the house of lies behind for a few hours. The gaslighting was over. The fire was about to begin. If the tax letter was the declaration of war, the Sunday barbecue was the occupation. I did not invite Harold and Linda Reed to my home. I did not invite them to eat my food or drink my beer. I came downstairs on Sunday morning to find my kitchen transformed into a catering staging area. Linda was unpacking plastic containers of store-bought potato salad, and Harold was already on my back deck wearing an apron that said, "Grill Master," standing over my custom smoker. Tyler met me at the bottom of the stairs. He put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that felt more like a restraint than a greeting. "Hey, Cliff, my parents decided to drop by. We thought it would be good for you. Socialization is important for cognitive health." He said it loud enough for them to hear. He was not talking to me. He was performing for an audience. I looked out the window. Harold was scraping the seasoning off my grill grates with a wire brush. That smoker had taken me 10 years to season perfectly. Every scratch of that wire brush felt like it was scraping across my own skin. But I remembered the plan. I remembered the toxicology report that was currently being processed at a private lab downtown. I forced my posture to slump. I let my eyes glaze over. "That is nice," I mumbled. "I like hot dogs." Tyler smiled, that same pitying, predatory smile. "Sure, Cliff. We will make you a hot dog. Go sit in your chair. We will bring you a plate." I walked out to the porch, but I did not sit in the corner. I sat at the main table right next to where Harold was butchering the steaks I had bought. Harold was a man who looked like he had been inflated with an air pump. He had a red face, thin hair, and a loud, booming voice that he used to mask the fact that he had filed for bankruptcy twice in the last decade. He drove a leased Mercedes E-Class that he couldn't afford to put premium gas in. Cliff, Harold bellowed, not looking at me. "Good to see you still kicking. Tyler tells me you have been having some rough days. Forgetfulness. Confusion. It happens to the best of us. My mother went the same way. Sad business." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned to Tyler, who was bringing out a tray of beers. "My beers. Imported lagers that I saved for special occasions." "So," son Harold said, cracking open a bottle. "Tell me more about this asset liquidation strategy." Linda and I were talking on the drive over. "It sounds like a game changer." Tyler pulled up a chair, sitting with his legs wide open, acting like the lord of the manor. "It is, Dad. We are sitting on a gold mine here. Literally. That warehouse downtown, I ran the comps again this morning. If we rezone and sell to the developer across the street, we are looking at an all-cash offer. No contingencies. We could close in 30 days. Linda walked out carrying a bowl of soggy potato salad. She was a woman who wore too much jewelry to hide the fact that it was all costume. She sat down and patted my hand like I was a golden retriever. "Oh, that sounds wonderful, Tyler. And it would be so good for Cliff. Imagine with that kind of money we could get him into that lovely facility in Bellevue The one with the koi ponds. He would be so safe there. I sat there chewing on a piece of ice, listening to them discuss my eviction. They were not just planning to sell my property. They were planning to erase me. Harold flipped a steak, pressing down on it with the spatula and squeezing all the juice out. I flinched physically. You never press the steak. So what is the holdup? Harold asked, taking a swig of my beer. Why haven't you listed it yet? Tyler sighed, casting a dramatic look in my direction. The legalities. Cliff is resistant. He has moments of clarity, but mostly he is just stubborn. He thinks he is still running a business. He doesn't understand that the warehouse is a liability. Taxes, insurance, maintenance. It is bleeding him dry. I am trying to get guardianship, but the courts are slow. Harold shook his head. Ridiculous. The man can barely feed himself. Look at him. They all looked at me. I was wearing a stained t-shirt I had put on purpose. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I stared at a fly buzzing around the potato salad. He is gone, Harold pronounced. The lights are on, but nobody is home. You need to push harder, Tyler, for his own good. If you sell that place, think of the capital injection for your startup. You could finally launch the beta. Exactly, Tyler said, his eyes lighting up. And we could help you and Mom with that second mortgage. We could pay off the Mercedes. We could take a family trip to Europe. Megan deserves a break. She has been working so hard taking care of him. I looked for Megan. She was standing by the sliding glass door holding a glass of wine. She was not looking at me. She was looking at Tyler. And for the first time I saw the reflection of his greed in her eyes. She wasn't just a victim of his charm anymore. She was becoming an accomplice. Megan Linda called out. Sweetie, come sit. We are talking about the new house. Tyler says if the deal goes through, you can get that colonial in the Highlands. 4 bedrooms. A nursery. Megan walked over. She sat down next to Tyler. She didn't look at me. She looked at the table. I don't know, she said softly. It feels wrong to just sell it while he is still here. It is his life's work. Tyler put his arm around her. Babe, listen to me. It is not his work anymore. It is just a pile of rust. He doesn't even know what he owns. If we leave it, the city will condemn it eventually. We have a responsibility to preserve the value of the estate. For us. For our future children. Harold chimed in, pointing a grease-covered pair of tongs at Megan. Your husband is right, honey. You have to be pragmatic. Cliff isn't the man he used to be. Do you really want to be changing his diapers in 5 years in this drafty old house? Or do you want to be secure? Megan looked at me. I held my breath. This was it. This was the moment she could choose her father. She could remember the nights I sat up with her when she was sick. She could remember the tuition checks I wrote without complaint. She could remember that I was the one who was always there. She looked at my vacant expression. She looked at the stain on my shirt. She looked at the expensive beer in Tyler's hand. You are right, she whispered. He is getting worse. Yesterday, he didn't even recognize the mailman. Maybe it is time to let go. The knife twisted in my gut. It hurt more than the poison. My daughter, my little girl, had just signed off on my disposal. She had traded me for a hypothetical house in the Highlands. Great Harold boomed, slapping the table. That is settled then. Tyler, get the paperwork ready. We will get a notary here next week. If he is having a bad day, he probably won't even know what he is signing. Just tell him it is an autograph for a fan. They all laughed. Harold laughed. Linda laughed. Tyler laughed. Even Megan managed a weak, guilty smile. I sat there frozen in my chair. I felt a coldness spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the cool breeze. It was the absolute 0-degree realization that I was alone. There was no family here. There were only vultures picking at a carcass they thought was dead. I decided then that I was done eating. I stood up, knocking my chair back clumsily. It made a loud scraping sound against the deck. "Where are you going?" Cliff, Tyler asked, annoyed. "We are about to eat." "Toilet," I grunted. I shuffled into the house. I walked past the kitchen, past the living room where my wedding photos used to hang before Tyler took them down to make space for his abstract art. I went into the bathroom on the first floor and locked the door. I turned on the faucet to mask the sound. Then I pulled out my burner phone. I had a text message from the private lab. Sample analyzed. High concentrations of diphenhydramine and benzodiazepine detected, consistent with long-term low-dose poisoning. Report ready for pickup. I stared at the screen. I had the smoking gun. I had the medical proof that my son-in-law was physically assaulting me. And now after this barbecue, I knew I had no moral obligation to spare any of them. Not even Megan. I flushed the toilet and splashed water on my face. I looked in the mirror. The vacuous, senile old man was gone. The eyes staring back were hard as flint. I unlocked the door and shuffled back out to the deck. Harold was serving the steaks. They were burnt on the outside and raw in the middle. "Here you go," Cliff, Harold said, dropping a piece of meat onto a paper plate. "Careful chewing. Don't want you to choke." I took the plate. I sat down. I cut a piece of the ruined steak and put it in my mouth. It tasted like ash. But I swallowed it. I would swallow all of it. Because tomorrow, the indigestion would be theirs. Tyler raised his beer bottle. "A toast," he said, looking around the table. "To family. And to the future." To the future, Harold and Linda chorused. Megan raised her glass silently. I picked up my water cup. To the future, I thought. My future. And your prison sentences. I watched them eat these people who thought they were royalty. They had no idea that the man sitting next to them wasn't a helpless invalid. They had no idea that while they were planning to spend my millions, I was planning the exact dimensions of their jail cells. The barbecue was a celebration, all right. It was the last supper of the condemned. And I was the chef who had prepared the final course. The Monday after the barbecue was gray and relentless, the kind of Seattle drizzle that seeps into your bones. But in my garage, it was warm. I had the space heater humming and the smell of 50-year-old motor oil filling the air. This was my sanctuary. The one place in the house Tyler had not yet colonized with his scented candles and motivational posters. I was working on the Vincent Black Shadow. To the uninitiated, it looked like a skeletal frame of rusted steel and a disassembled engine block spread across my workbench. To me, it was a sleeping beast. A 1950 Series C, one of only a few thousand ever made. Restored, it would fetch over $100,000 at auction. But I wasn't restoring it to sell. I was restoring it to remember who I was. I was carefully polishing the rocker arm covers with a microfiber cloth lost in the rhythm of the work. For a moment, I forgot about the poison in the hydrangeas. I forgot about the betrayal at the dinner table. It was just me and the machine. The door from the kitchen slammed open. The sanctuary was breached. Tyler walked in wearing a tracksuit that looked brand new and holding a protein shake. He stopped at the top of the stairs, wrinkling his nose at the smell of grease. He surveyed the garage not like a guest, but like a landlord inspecting a tenant's mess. "Cliff," he said, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "We need to talk about this situation." I didn't look up. I kept polishing the chrome. "What situation, Tyler?" "This," he said, waving his hand vaguely at the workbench. "This hoarding. We are trying to stage the house for appraisal, remember. The realtor is coming on Thursday. She cannot see this. It looks like a junkyard exploded in here." I put the cloth down slowly. "This is a workshop, Tyler. It is where I work." Tyler walked down the stairs, his sneakers squeaking on the oil-stained floor. Work? Cliff, look at this. He pointed at the engine block. This is scrap metal. You have been fiddling with this same pile of rust for 3 years. It never runs. It never moves. It just sits here collecting dust and taking up valuable square footage. He didn't understand. He couldn't understand. Men like Tyler saw the world in finished products. They wanted the car shiny on the showroom floor. They didn't want to know about the hours of grinding welding and calibration that made it run. They wanted the glory without the grease. I am fixing it, I said, keeping my voice flat. It takes time. Time is money, Cliff, he snapped. And right now this junk is costing us money. I measured the dimensions. If we clear all this trash out, we can turn this into a home gym or a media room. That adds at least 20 grand to the asking price of the house. He walked closer to the bike frame. It was sitting on the center stand, balanced precariously, while I adjusted the suspension. He walked around it, shaking his head with exaggerated disgust. Look at this, he sneered. It is dangerous. Tetanus waiting to happen. What if our future kids come down here? Don't touch it, Tyler, I warned. My voice was low, but it had a hard edge. He looked at me, challenging. Or what? You will forget where you put your wrench. You will fall asleep standing up, he laughed. You are in no position to give orders, Cliff. You are a dependent now. Then he did it. He pulled his leg back and kicked the rear tire of the Vincent. It wasn't a hard kick, just a disrespectful shove with the sole of his expensive shoe. But the bike was on the stand. The force was enough to rock it. The heavy steel frame swayed to the left. I lunged forward, my heart hammering in my throat, catching the handlebars just before 70 years of engineering crashed onto the concrete floor. The adrenaline surged through me. It took every ounce of my willpower not to pick up the torque wrench and shatter his knee. I steadied the bike, my knuckles white, as I gripped the rubber handles. Get out, I whispered. Tyler didn't back down. He saw my reaction not as strength, but as the desperate clinging of a crazy old man to his garbage. No, you get out, Cliff, he shouted, stepping into my personal space. This is exactly what I am talking about. You care more about this rusted piece of crap than you do about your family's future. You are selfish. You are obsessed. He pointed a finger in my face. Listen to me closely. Thursday. The junk removal crew is coming at 8 a.m. I am having them clear this entire room. Everything goes. The tools, the benches, and especially this ugly bike. If you are not here to supervise, well, that is your problem. But knowing your memory lately, you will probably forget they are coming anyway. I stared at him. He was serious. He was going to throw away a $100,000 motorcycle because he wanted a room to do yoga in. He was going to erase my history because it didn't fit his aesthetic. You cannot do that, I said. This is my property. Tyler laughed, a cold, harsh bark. Property, Cliff. By next week, you won't have property. The competency hearing is scheduled. Once the judge sees the videos, once he hears the testimony about the gas stove and the wandering, you will be lucky if they let you own a toothbrush. Megan has already agreed. We are doing this for you. He turned his back on me and started walking up the stairs. At the doorway, he paused and looked back. Clean up your mess, Cliff, or I will do it for you. And trust me, I won't be gentle. The door slammed shut. The silence returned to the garage, but the peace was gone. I stood there holding on to the Vincent like it was a lifeline. I could feel the cold metal seeping into my palms. My hands were shaking not from age, but from a rage so pure it felt like liquid fire in my veins. He had kicked my bike. He had called my life's work trash. He had threatened to erase me. I looked at the bike. The Vincent Black Shadow was known as the world's first superbike. It was fast, dangerous, and unforgiving. It was a machine designed for speed and precision. It was built to dominate the road. Tyler thought I was a broken-down Ford. He didn't know he was kicking a Vincent. I grabbed a rag and wiped the spot on the tire where his shoe had touched. The rubber was clean. The bike was safe. But I wasn't. I realized then that I couldn't wait for the slow wheels of justice. I couldn't wait for the toxicology report to make its way through the courts. By next week, he might actually succeed in getting that guardianship. He might actually bring that junk crew. I needed to end this. Now. I needed to give him exactly what he wanted. He wanted the warehouse, fine. He wanted to be a big-shot developer, fine. I would give him the keys to the kingdom, and I would watch the portcullis slam down on his neck. I walked over to my workbench. I picked up a small, intricate gear I had been machining. I turned it over in my fingers. It was perfect. Sharp. Strong. Tyler wanted to clear out the trash, I agreed. It was time to take out the garbage. I went to the wall safe hidden behind the tool rack. I spun the dial. Click, click, click. The door swung open. Inside was the deed to the warehouse, the real one, and a set of keys. I took the keys out. I held them in my hand. They were heavy brass and old, just like me. I decided that tomorrow I would have another episode. I would be confused. I would be compliant. I would leave these keys on the kitchen counter right next to the fruit bowl, just like I had planned. But this time I would make sure he knew exactly which door they opened. The kick to the bike was the catalyst. It was the spark that ignited the gasoline. Tyler Reed had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He had insulted the mechanic in his own garage, and now the mechanic was going to dismantle him. I turned off the space heater. I patted the tank of the Vincent. "Soon, old girl," I whispered. "Soon we will go for a ride, and the garage will be empty." But not because of him. I walked up the stairs, leaving the garage in darkness. The trap was set. The bait was ready. All I had to do was wait for the rat to get hungry. And Tyler was always hungry. The rage from the incident in the garage had settled into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I spent the next morning in the kitchen nursing a cup of tea that I had made myself, watching the rain streak against the window. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of a bomb waiting to detonate. Tyler had not come down for breakfast. Megan had left for work early, her eyes red and puffy, avoiding my gaze as she grabbed her keys. She was crumbling under the pressure of her husband's ambition, but she was still choosing him. That was her mistake. Around 10 o'clock, I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Tyler appeared. He looked like a man who had been hunted through the night. His skin was the color of old paste, and there were dark bruised circles under his eyes. He wasn't wearing his usual crisp suit or the new tracksuit. He was wearing jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt. He didn't look at me. He went straight to the window and peered through the blinds, his body tense as a wire. He was looking for someone. I sat at the table playing with a spoon, letting my mouth hang open slightly, in my practiced mask of senility. But my eyes were sharp. I saw the way his hand shook as he reached for the coffee pot. I saw the sweat beading on his hairline, even though the house was cool. A car drove past slowly outside. It was a black SUV with tinted windows. Tyler flinched. He dropped the mug he was holding. It shattered on the floor, sending shards of ceramic and hot coffee everywhere. He didn't curse. He didn't yell at me for being in the way. He just froze, staring at the shattered pieces like they were his life falling apart. I didn't move. I didn't offer to help. I just watched. His phone rang. It wasn't the standard ringtone he used for business calls. It was a jarring mechanical buzz. He snatched it from his pocket, looking at the screen with pure terror. He didn't answer it immediately. He looked at me, then bolted for the back door, stepping over the broken glass. I waited 3 seconds, then stood up. My joints didn't ache today. The adrenaline of the hunt kept me limber. I moved silently to the mudroom adjacent to the back porch. The window was cracked open just an inch. I pressed myself against the wall and listened. Tyler's voice was a harsh whisper. I told you I would get it. I just need a few more days. The asset is real. It is 12 million in land alone. There was a pause. I could hear a voice on the other end, deep and distorted by the speakerphone. I didn't care about the land, Tyler, the voice said. We discussed terms. You leveraged the margin call against a guarantee of liquidity by Tuesday. It is Tuesday. I leaned closer. This wasn't a bank. Banks send letters. Banks have legal departments. This was the underground. This was hard money. Tyler had been gambling with sharks. I am getting guardianship. Tyler pleaded, his voice cracking. The old man is incompetent. The court date is next week. Once I have the signature, I can leverage the deed. Just give me 1 week. The laugh that came from the phone made the hair on my arms stand up. Next week, the voice said. You don't have next week. You have 48 hours, $200,000, in crypto or cash. If I don't see the transfer by Thursday midnight, we are not coming for the money anymore. We are coming for the collateral. And since you have no assets, the collateral is you. I hear pianists need their fingers, Tyler. Do CEOs need their thumbs? The line went dead. I heard a sound that I will never forget. It was the sound of a grown man, dry heaving in fear. Tyler was retching over the railing of my deck. He was drowning. He had borrowed money from dangerous men to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford, betting everything on the idea that he could steal my wealth before the bill came due. But the bill had arrived early. I slipped back into the kitchen and sat down before he came back inside. When he finally entered, he looked like a ghost. He washed his face at the sink, splashing water frantically, trying to scrub away the terror. He turned and saw me watching him. For a second, the mask slipped. He didn't see a senile old man. He saw a lifeline. He saw a piggy bank. He walked over to me, grabbing my shoulders. His grip was painful. Cliff, he said, his breath sour. Cliff, listen to me. I need you to sign something. Today. Right now. I blinked slowly. Sign what? An autograph, no. He screamed, shaking me. The papers. The power of attorney. I need you to sign over the warehouse management. Just temporary. Please. We are in danger, Cliff. Bad people are coming. If I don't pay them, they are going to hurt us. They are going to hurt Megan. He was using my daughter as a shield. He was using his own mess to guilt me into saving him. I pulled away from his grip. I don't like your friends, Tyler. They are too loud. He stared at me, his eyes wild. He realized then that he couldn't talk me into it. He couldn't reason with dementia, and he couldn't wait for the court. The legal route was dead. The timeline had collapsed. He needed 200 grand in 2 days. He couldn't sell the land that fast. But the contents, I could see the gears turning in his desperate mind. He remembered the tax letter. He remembered the size of the warehouse. 5,000 square feet. Even if it was just scrap metal copper wiring and industrial tools, a warehouse that size could hold $500,000 in liquidation value. If he could get in, if he could load up a truck and sell it to a fence, he could pay off the sharks. He didn't need the deed anymore. He just needed to get inside. He spun around and ran to the living room. I heard him tearing through drawers. He was looking for the keys. He was looking for the ring I usually kept on the hook by the door. But the hook was empty. I had moved them. He came back into the kitchen, frantic. Where are they? He shouted. The keys, the big brass keys. Where did you put them, old man? I looked at my tea. Keys, I murmured. I think I gave them to the gardener. Or maybe I buried them. To keep the pirates away. Tyler screamed in frustration. He kicked the cabinet door, leaving a scuff mark on the wood. He grabbed his hair, pulling at it. He was trapped. He couldn't find the keys. He couldn't get me to sign. and the clock was ticking down to his destruction. He pulled out his phone again. He dialed a number. This time he didn't whisper. He didn't care if I heard. "Yeah, it is me," he said into the phone. "I need a crew. Tonight. No, I don't have the keys. Bring the cutters. Bring the heavy-duty ones. And a truck. A big one. We are cleaning the place out." He listened for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah. Industrial equipment. Copper. Maybe vintage cars. I don't know exactly, but it is big. I will pay you double the usual rate once we fence the goods. Just meet me there at midnight." He hung up and he looked at me one last time. There was no pity in his eyes, only a cold, transactional hatred. "You forced me to do this, Cliff," he said. "You and your stubbornness. I tried to do it the nice way. I tried to use the courts. But you want to play games. Fine. We will play. Tonight I am taking what is mine. And tomorrow when the banks open, I will be debt-free and you will be in a nursing home." He grabbed his car keys and stormed out. He needed to prepare. He needed to rent a truck. He needed to gather his thieves. I waited until I heard his rental car screech out of the driveway. Then I stood up and walked to the sink. I washed my cup calmly. My hands were steady. He had taken the bait. He wasn't just going to trespass. He was going to commit grand larceny. He was going to break into a defense contractor's facility with a team of criminals to steal classified assets. I walked to the hallway and picked up the phone. I dialed Sarge. "It is tonight," I said. "He is bringing a crew. He is desperate. Tell the boys to stay out of sight until he cuts the lock. I want him to think he made it. I want him to step inside." Sarge chuckled on the other end. "Roger that, Cliff. The cameras are polished. The popcorn is ready. Should we call the PD now?" "Not yet," I said. "Let him sweat. Let him work for it. Call them when the bolt cutters touch the chain. I want them to catch him with the metal in his hands." I hung up. I looked at the clock. It was noon. I had 12 hours to kill. I decided to go to the garage. The Vincent was safe. The trap was set. And for the first time in months, the air in the house felt clean. The pressure wasn't on me anymore. It was on Tyler. And tonight, he was going to find out that some shadows bite back. The most effective traps are not the ones you hide in the shadows. They are the ones you leave out in the open, bathed in sunlight, daring the prey to take a bite. I knew Tyler was desperate. I knew the clock was ticking down on his life, and panic makes a man sloppy. It makes him see what he wants to see, not what is actually there. I went to my workbench in the garage and pulled out a small box of miscellaneous hardware I had kept for 30 years. I dug through the rusted washers and screws until I found it. A large, heavy brass key. It belonged to a padlock I had cut off a storage container back in the 90s. It was useless. It opened nothing. But it looked important. It felt heavy in the hand, the kind of key that guards something valuable. I took a piece of yellowed masking tape and wrapped it around the head of the key. With a thick black marker, I wrote 3 words. Warehouse, door B. I wrote it in shaky block letters, mimicking the tremor I had been faking for weeks. Then I attached it to a simple wire ring. It looked like the Holy Grail. It looked like the answer to every prayer Tyler had been screaming into the void. I waited until 3 in the afternoon. The house was quiet. Tyler was in the living room, pacing back and forth, probably calculating how many hours he had left before the sharks came for his fingers. I walked into the kitchen, shuffling my feet, muttering to myself about taxes and inspections. I made a show of patting my pockets, acting flustered. "Where did I put it?" I whispered loudly enough for him to hear. "Gotta check the inventory. Gotta make sure the copper is safe." I placed the key on the kitchen island, right next to the fruit bowl. I set it down with a heavy clink. Then I opened the refrigerator and stared into it, letting the cool air wash over my face, counting to 10. I grabbed a pitcher of water, poured a glass, and then, as if distracted by a sudden thought, I wandered out of the kitchen towards the backyard, leaving the key behind. I walked to the tool shed, slipped inside, and locked the door. I pulled out my tablet and opened the app that connected to the hidden camera I had installed in the smoke detector above the kitchen island. The feed was crisp and clear. I watched. For a full minute, nothing happened. The kitchen was empty. Then Tyler appeared in the frame. He moved like a ghost, silent and erratic. He walked to the sink to get water, ignoring the island. He was so consumed by his fear that he almost missed it. Then he turned. He froze. I saw his eyes lock onto the brass key. I saw the recognition hit him like a physical blow. He stopped breathing. He looked toward the back door where I had just exited. He looked toward the stairs. He crept forward, his hand hovering over the granite countertop. He didn't grab it immediately. He was suspicious. It was too easy. He leaned in, reading the tag. I could see his lips move as he sounded out the words. Warehouse. Door B. His face transformed. The terror vanished, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and greed. He reached out and touched the cold metal. He weighed it in his hand. He was thinking about the copper I had mentioned. He was thinking about the industrial machines. He was thinking about the $200,000 he needed. But Tyler was a survivor, or at least he thought he was. He knew he couldn't just take it. If I came back and found the key gone, I might panic. I might call the police. He needed to buy time. He needed me to stay calm until he could empty the place. I watched as he reached into his own pocket. He pulled out his own keychain. He fumbled with it, his fingers shaking. He worked a key off his ring. It was a standard house key, brass, roughly the same size, but with a completely different tooth pattern. To a mechanic, the difference was obvious. To a senile old man with bad eyesight, it was a perfect match. He made the switch. He pocketed my decoy key and placed his house key on the counter, positioning it exactly where mine had been. He even turned the tag on his key so the blank side was facing up, hiding the fact that it wasn't labeled. He stepped back, admiring his work. He smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who thinks he has just outsmarted fate. He grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl, took a bite, and walked out of the kitchen with a bounce in his step. I sat in the tool shed and let out a long breath. The rat had taken the cheese. He had the key. He thought he had access. He thought he was going to walk through the front door of my fortress and loot it. He didn't know that the key opened nothing. He didn't know that door B didn't even exist. There was only the main gate and the loading dock, both secured by biometric scanners and military-grade padlocks that required a code I changed weekly. But the key wasn't designed to open a door. It was designed to open a prison cell. By putting it in his pocket with the intent to use it, he had crossed the line from thought to action. He had just handed me the final piece of evidence. I closed the camera app and dialed a number I had memorized. It rang twice before a deep, calm voice answered. "Harland," I said. Cliff, the lawyer, replied. "Is it done?" He took the bait. I said, watching a spider weave a web in the corner of the shed. "He has the key. He thinks he is clever. He switched it with a dummy. He is going tonight." "Excellent," Harland said. "I have the papers drafted. The moment he sets foot on that property, he is violating the Federal Trespass Act, given the defense contracts associated with the site. And since he is bringing a crew to remove assets, we add conspiracy to commit grand larceny." "What about the liability?" I asked. "If he gets hurt trying to break in?" Harland laughed dryly. "He is an intruder in a secured industrial zone at midnight. You have posted warning signs. You have cameras. You are not liable for his stupidity. Cliff, once the police arrive, we serve him with the divorce papers and the restraining order simultaneously. It will be a clean sweep." "Good," I said. "I want him to feel safe. I want him to think he won. And then I want the lights to come on. I hung up the phone. I walked back into the house. I went to the kitchen and picked up the key Tyler had left. I looked at it. It was a cheap copy made of soft metal. It would snap if you turned it too hard. Just like him. I put his key in my pocket. I went to the living room and sat in my chair. I closed my eyes and waited for the night. The performance was over. The trap was sprung. Now all that was left was the execution. I felt a strange sense of peace. I had protected my legacy. I had protected my daughter even if she didn't know it yet. And tonight I was going to teach a lesson that no amount of money could buy. I was going to teach Tyler Reed that you never ever underestimate the man who built the castle just because he is wearing dirty boots. The rain in Seattle does not wash things clean. It just makes the grime slicker. It was 11 o'clock at night when the final act began. I was sitting in my recliner in the living room, a blanket pulled up to my chin, pretending to watch a rerun of a sitcom I had seen 100 times. My eyes were half closed, my breathing shallow and rhythmic. To anyone watching, I was an old man drifting off into a senile slumber. But under the blanket, my hand was resting on the grip of a flashlight, and my heart was beating with the slow, heavy thud of a war drum. Tyler came down the stairs. He had changed clothes again. He was wearing dark jeans and a black hoodie, looking less like a CEO and more like the criminal he was about to become. He was moving fast, his energy frantic and jagged. He stopped at the mirror in the hallway, checking his reflection. He didn't see a desperate man about to commit a felony. He saw a hero. He saw a genius who was taking what the world owed him. Megan came down behind him, wrapping her arms around her waist. She looked small, diminished by the stress of the last few weeks. "Tyler," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Do you really have to go? It is so late. Who meets for business at midnight?" Tyler turned to her. He put his hands on her shoulders, squeezing a little too hard. "This is how the big deals happen, babe. The investors from Hong Kong just landed. Their schedule is tight. If I want their capital, I have to meet them on their time. This is it. This is the meeting that saves us." He kissed her on the forehead, but his eyes were looking over her shoulder at the front door. "I will be back in a few hours, and when I come back, our problems will be gone. Go to sleep. Don't wait up." He grabbed a heavy duffel bag from the floor. As he lifted it, I heard the distinct clank of metal on metal. It wasn't the sound of a laptop or a portfolio. It was the sound of tools. Heavy tools. He walked past my chair without even looking at me. To him, I was just a piece of furniture, a part of the scenery that he had already conquered. The front door closed. The lock clicked. I heard his footsteps crunching on the gravel driveway, moving away from his rental car and toward the street where a large white box truck was idling. He had rented it under a fake name, no doubt. I waited until I heard the truck's heavy door slam shut and the engine groan into gear. Megan stood in the hallway for a moment, staring at the door. Then she turned and looked at me. She walked over and tucked the blanket tighter around my shoulders. "Sleep well, Dad," she whispered. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to grab her hand and tell her everything. But I couldn't. Not yet. She had to see the wreckage before she could understand why I had to burn the ship. She went upstairs. I counted to 60. Then I threw off the blanket. I didn't need a cane. I didn't need a walker. I moved to the back door with the silent precision of a man who had spent 40 years working around dangerous machinery. I slipped out into the cold night air. The rain hit my face sharp and waking. I walked around the side of the house to the old shed where I kept my truck. It was a 2005 Ford F-150, black as coal. It had dents and scratches, but the engine was a masterpiece I had rebuilt myself. I had installed a kill switch for the daytime running lights years ago, a modification for hunting trips that now served a different purpose. I climbed into the cab. The smell of old leather and oil greeted me. It smelled like justice. I turned the key. The engine caught instantly, a low rumble that was barely audible over the rain. I left the lights off. I rolled down the driveway in neutral, letting gravity take me to the street. Down the block, I saw the red taillights of the box truck turning the corner. The hunt was on. I kept a 2-block distance. Tyler was driving badly. He was swerving slightly, crossing the center line, jerky with nerves. He drove toward the industrial district south of the stadium. This wasn't the route to a hotel meeting. This was the route to the underbelly of the city. He pulled into the parking lot of a dilapidated gas station near the on-ramp. I pulled over to the curb, killing my engine, blending into the shadows of a row of parked cars. I watched through the rain-streaked windshield. 2 men stepped out of the darkness near the air pump. They were not investors. One was huge, a mountain of muscle, wearing a torn denim vest over a hoodie. The other was thin, wiry, with a face that twitched under the harsh fluorescent lights of the station. They looked like the kind of men you hire when you don't want questions asked. Tyler jumped out of the truck. I saw him waving his arms, explaining something. The big man just nodded and spat on the ground. The thin one laughed, a sharp, jagged movement. Tyler unlocked the back of the truck. The men tossed in their own bags. More tools, maybe torches, maybe crowbars. They climbed into the cab with Tyler. 3 rats in a white box heading for a trap designed for one. The truck pulled out, merging onto the highway. I followed. The drive to the warehouse district took 20 minutes. The city changed around us. The sparkling glass towers of Amazon and Google faded away, replaced by the squat, dark shapes of old manufacturing. The roads became rougher, potholed, and neglected. This was the part of Seattle that people forgot. The part that built the city before the code monkeys took over. My hands were steady on the wheel. I thought about the warehouse. I thought about the machines inside. Lathes that had turned parts for Boeing. Presses that had stamped steel for the Navy. They were silent giants waiting in the dark. Tyler thought they were scrap. He didn't know that each one weighed 5 tons and was bolted to the foundation with concrete anchors. He thought he was going to load them into a rental truck. He was delusional. But that wasn't the point. He wasn't going to get far enough to lift anything. The truck took the exit for 4th Avenue South. The streetlights here were broken, leaving long stretches of road in absolute blackness. To my left, the massive cranes of the port looked like skeletal dinosaurs against the purple sky. To my right, the chain-link fences of salvage yards and warehouses flew by. Tyler slowed down. He was looking for the address. He was looking for the gold mine. I knew exactly where he was going. My warehouse was at the end of a dead-end street bordered by the train tracks on one side and a canal on the other. It was isolated, perfect for a heist, perfect for an ambush. He turned onto the street. I didn't follow him in. There was only one way out. I pulled my truck into an alleyway facing the intersection, tucked behind a dumpster. I killed the engine. I cracked my window to hear. I saw the white truck rumble down the street, its headlights cutting through the gloom. It looked out of place, a white bacteria invading a gray host. It reached the end of the road. I saw the brake lights flare red, illuminating the heavy iron gate of my property. The sign on the gate was old and faded, but the letters were still visible: Dalton Industrial. Restricted area. Federal contractor. Tyler didn't read the sign. Or if he did, he didn't care. The truck idled for a moment. Then the driver's door opened. Tyler stepped out into the rain. He looked small against the backdrop of the massive building. The warehouse loomed over him, a dark monolith of brick and steel. It didn't look like a victim. It looked like a fortress. The 2 thugs climbed out the passenger side. The big one stretched, cracking his knuckles. The thin one lit a cigarette, the flame flaring briefly in the dark. Tyler pointed at the gate. He reached into his pocket. I knew what he was holding. The brass key. The fake key. The key to his undoing. He walked up to the heavy padlock securing the chain. He tried to insert the key. Even from here I could see his frustration. He jiggled it. He twisted it. He kicked the gate. The key didn't fit. Of course it didn't fit. He turned back to the men shouting something I couldn't hear, but I could guess. Plan B. The big man went to the truck and pulled out a pair of long-handled bolt cutters. They glinted in the truck's headlights. This was it. The moment of transition. Trespassing was a misdemeanor. Cutting a lock on a secured facility was a felony. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the call button for Sarge. I watched as the big man clamped the jaws of the cutter onto the chain. Tyler stood back, wiping rain from his face, watching with a mixture of fear and anticipation. He thought the hard part was over. He thought the only thing standing between him and salvation was a piece of hardened steel. The big man bore down on the handles. There was a sharp snap that echoed down the empty street like a gunshot. The chain fell away. The gate swung open with a groan of rusted hinges. Tyler stepped forward. He walked across the property line. He was inside. I pressed the call button. Now I whispered to the empty cab of my truck. I watched as the three men climbed back into the truck and drove it through the open gate, heading toward the loading dock. They were inside the belly of the beast. The trap had closed. I sat back in my seat, listening to the rain drumming on the roof, and waited for the sirens. The drive was over. The destination had been reached, and for Tyler Reed, there would be no return trip. The sound of the bolt cutters snapping through the hardened steel chain was loud, a sharp crack that echoed off the brick walls of the alleyway like a gunshot. I watched from the shadows of my truck cab, gripping the steering wheel. That sound was the final seal on Tyler's fate. Up until that moment, he was just a desperate man with a fake key. Now he was a felon. The heavy iron gate groaned as the big man pushed it open. It swung inward, revealing the dark, gaping maw of the loading bay. Tyler didn't hesitate. He ran back to the truck, waved his arm frantically, and guided the white box truck into the yard. He was rushing, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He was terrified of the silence, terrified of the dark, and terrifyingly eager to get his hands on the fortune he believed was waiting inside. They parked the truck right up against the loading dock. Tyler jumped out, followed by his two hired muscles. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking his hoodie, plastering his hair to his forehead. He looked manic. He ran up the concrete steps to the roll-up door. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the brass key I had planted. The fake key. He jammed it into the padlock on the door. I could see him twisting it, shaking it. I could see his shoulders tense up. It didn't turn. Of course it didn't turn. He pulled it out, stared at it, and then hammered it back in, screaming something at the metal. "Open it!" I heard him yell over the rain. "Just open it!" The big man stepped up, pushed Tyler aside, and raised the bolt cutters again. Another snap. The padlock fell to the concrete with a dull clatter. Tyler grabbed the chain of the roll-up door and heaved. The door was old and heavy, ungreased for years. It screeched in protest, a metal-on-metal shriek that sounded like a dying animal. It rose slowly, revealing the blackness inside. This was the moment. This was the payoff. Tyler turned on a heavy-duty flashlight and stepped across the threshold. I wasn't inside with him, but I didn't need to be. I knew every inch of that warehouse. I knew exactly what the beam of his flashlight was hitting, and I knew exactly what was going through his mind. Tyler expected Aladdin's cave. He expected to see pallets of copper wire that he could strip and sell for quick cash. He expected crates of high-end electronics, or maybe vintage cars under dust sheets. He expected liquid assets, things he could load into a truck and turn into $200,000 by sunrise. Instead, his light cut through the dusty air and landed on a monster. It was a 20-ton hydraulic press from the 1980s. It stood 15 feet tall, a massive skeleton of cast iron and steel covered in a layer of industrial grime. It was ugly. It was immovable. and to a man like Tyler, it was worthless. I watched through the open door as his light swung frantically from left to right. He ran deeper into the warehouse. The two thugs followed him, their own lights dancing across the ceiling. "Where is it?" I heard Tyler's voice, high and cracking. "Where is the inventory?" His light landed on a row of milling machines. They were bolted to the floor, heavy beasts that required a crane to move. He ran past them. He found a crate and ripped the lid off with his bare hands. Inside were thousands of steel ball bearings, heavy, greasy, and completely useless to him. He ran to the back of the warehouse. He found the racks of prototypes. These were the inventions that had made me rich. The early models of the hydraulic couplings, the valve systems for aircraft landing gear. To an engineer, this shelf was worth millions in intellectual property. To Tyler, it was just a shelf full of weird-shaped metal tubes. He was running in circles now. He kicked a crate. He shoved a pile of tarps, hoping to find a Ferrari underneath, but found only a backup generator that weighed as much as a small house. The warehouse was full. It was packed to the rafters. But it was full of industry. It was full of the heavy, dirty, complicated reality of manufacturing. There was no gold. There was no cash. There was nothing he could pick up. There was nothing he could steal. I saw him stop in the center of the aisle. He spun around, shining his light into the empty corners. The silence of the warehouse swallowed him. The vastness of the space mocked him. "This is junk," he screamed. It was a primal sound, a howl of pure despair. "It is just junk. Where is the money? Where is the copper?" The big thug walked up to him. He didn't look happy. He kicked a steel drum, making a hollow boom. "Yo, boss," the thug said, his voice echoing. "This stuff is bolted down. We can't move this. We need a forklift. We need a flatbed. You said there was loose cargo." Tyler grabbed his hair with both hands. "There has to be something. Look in the office, look in the safe." He ran toward the small glass-enclosed foreman's office on the mezzanine. He sprinted up the metal stairs, tripping on the last step, scrambling on his hands and knees. He kicked the door open. I knew what was in there. A metal desk, a broken chair, and a filing cabinet full of maintenance logs from 1995. Tyler ripped the drawers out. Papers flew everywhere, fluttering down to the factory floor like snow. He swept the desk clear, smashing an old coffee mug. He found nothing. No cash box. No secret ledger. No diamonds. He came out to the railing of the mezzanine and looked down at his crew. He looked small. He looked broken. "It is gone," he sobbed. "He tricked me. The old man tricked me. It is just rust. It is all just rust." The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had leveraged his life, he had threatened his family. He had hired criminals and he had broken into a fortress, all to steal a pile of scrap metal that he couldn't even move. The $200,000 he owed was due in 24 hours, and he was standing in a graveyard of iron with empty pockets. The skinny thug looked up at him. He lit a cigarette, the cherry glowing in the dark. "We don't care about rust, man," the thug said. "You hired us for a job. We drove the truck. We cut the lock. That is $5 grand. Each, payable now." Tyler gripped the railing. I don't have it. I was going to pay you with the goods." The big thug laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was the sound of bones breaking. He reached into his jacket and pulled out something that looked like a tire iron. "Bad answer, CEO," the big thug said. "You better find something in this pile of trash that is worth 10 grand, or you are going to be part of the inventory." Tyler backed away from the railing. He was trapped. Below him were the wolves he had invited in. Above him was the leaking roof of a building he had coveted. And all around him were the silent, judgmental machines of the father-in-law he had despised. I watched from my truck, feeling a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. He wanted to know the value of my work. He was looking right at it. But he didn't have the eyes to see it. He saw rust. I saw history. He saw junk. I saw power. And now he was about to see the consequences. I reached for my phone. The show inside was getting good, but it was time for the grand finale. Tyler was screaming at the thugs, begging for time, begging for mercy. He was offering them the warehouse deed, promising them he could sell the land if they just waited. They weren't listening. The big man started climbing the stairs. I pressed the call button. Dispatch, a voice answered. "This is Cliff Dalton," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I am the owner of the Dalton Industrial Facility on 4th Avenue. I have a break-in in progress. 3 men. They have cut the gate. They are inside the main building. And officer, yes sir, they are armed. And they are threatening to burn the place down." I hung up. I didn't lie. In a way, Tyler had already burned everything down. He had burned his marriage. He had burned his future. He had burned his life. I rolled down my window to listen. Far off in the distance, over the sound of the rain and the arguing inside the warehouse, I heard the first wail of a siren. It was faint, but it was getting louder. Tyler heard it too. Inside the warehouse, the shouting stopped. The big man froze on the stairs. Tyler looked toward the open door, toward the street, toward me. He couldn't see me in the dark, but I knew he could feel me. "Run, Tyler," I whispered. "Run and see how far you get." The sirens grew closer, a chorus of justice racing through the wet streets of Seattle. The twist wasn't that the warehouse was empty. The twist was that it was full of evidence. And Tyler was standing right in the center of it, holding the bag. The silence that followed the sirens was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a trap snapping shut. Inside the warehouse, the shouting had stopped. The big thug had lowered his tire iron, not out of mercy, but out of self-preservation. He knew the sound of a tactical entry team when he heard it. Tyler, however, was running on a different fuel. He was running on pure, unadulterated delusion. I watched from the cab of my truck as the first cruiser skidded through the open gate, its tires kicking up mud and gravel. Then came a second, then a third. Blue and red lights exploded against the wet brick walls, turning the rusty fortress into a strobe-lit nightmare. The rain caught the light, looking like falling shards of glass. Tyler ran toward the light. He actually ran toward the police. In his twisted mind, the police were not here to arrest him. They were here to save him from the thugs. They were public servants, and he was a CEO. He thought he could spin this. He thought he could talk his way out of a felony, just like he talked his way out of paying rent. Officer Tyler screamed, waving his hands over his head. "Over here, thank God you are here, get on the ground," a voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "Drop to your knees." Now. Tyler skidded to a halt. He looked confused. He pointed back into the dark warehouse. "No, you don't understand. I'm the victim. Those men inside, they work for me. They are trying to rob me." I stepped out of my truck. The rain soaked me instantly, but I didn't feel it. I walked toward the perimeter of the police line, staying just out of the glare. I wanted a front row seat. 2 officers advanced on Tyler, weapons drawn. They didn't care about his suit. They didn't care about his protestations. They saw a suspect at the scene of a break-in at a federal contractor site. They saw a threat. "Get down," the lead officer shouted again. Tyler dropped to his knees, but his mouth kept moving. "I am the owner. My name is Tyler Reed. I own this facility. Ask my father-in-law. He is senile. He forgot to give me the key, so I had to improvise." That was my cue. I signaled to the dark sedan that had pulled up silently behind the police cruisers. The door opened, and Harlan stepped out. He was wearing a trench coat and holding a briefcase that looked like it could survive a nuclear blast. Behind him was a man I had not seen in years, but whose number I still had on speed dial. Agent Miller from the Department of Defense. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He was wearing a gray suit that cost more than Tyler's entire wardrobe, and he had the kind of eyes that could burn a hole through steel. We walked past the police line. An officer moved to stop us, but Agent Miller simply held up a badge. The officer stepped back, nodding respectfully. We walked into the circle of light. Tyler looked up. He was squinting against the glare. When he saw me, his face crumbled. He didn't look relieved. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Cliff," he whispered. "Cliff, tell them, this is a misunderstanding." I stopped 5 feet away from him. I looked down. I didn't look like a confused old man anymore. I stood straight, my shoulders back, my hands steady at my sides. "Officer," I said, my voice cutting through the rain. "This man does not own this facility. He is an intruder, and he has just compromised a secure site." Tyler scrambled to his feet, ignoring the police order. "That is a lie. He is sick. He has dementia. I have power of attorney." Harlan stepped forward. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a single crisp document. He handed it to the police sergeant who had walked over. "Counselor Harlan representing Mr. Dalton," he said smoothly. "There is no power of attorney. Mr. Dalton is fully competent. In fact, he just passed a neurological exam yesterday. What you have here is a case of breaking and entering conspiracy to commit grand larceny, and given the nature of the equipment inside industrial espionage." Tyler's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a hook. "Espionage? Are you crazy? It is just junk. It is just rusty metal." Agent Miller stepped into the light. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. He looked at the open warehouse door, then he looked at Tyler. "That rusty metal, as you call it, includes the prototype molds for the hydraulic landing gear used on the Fa-35 fighter jet," Miller said. His voice was dry and devoid of emotion. "This facility is a defunct, but still classified storage site for Dalton Industrial, a Tier 1 defense contractor. By cutting that lock, son, you didn't just break into a warehouse. You broke into a matter of national security." Tyler looked from Miller to me. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. He realized then that the game wasn't checkers. It wasn't even chess. He had been playing Russian roulette with a fully loaded gun. "National security," Tyler stammered. I didn't know. I was just trying to liquidate assets." "You were trying to sell federal property to unauthorized buyers," I said, pointing to the 2 thugs who were now being dragged out of the warehouse in handcuffs. "That is 20 years, Tyler. Minimum." Tyler lunged toward me. He wasn't attacking. He was begging. He fell at my feet, grabbing the hem of my jeans. "Cliff. Cliff, please, I am family. I am Megan's husband. You cannot let them take me. The sharks, Cliff. If I go to jail, I can't pay them. They will kill me." I looked down at him. I remembered the poison in my coffee. I remembered the gas stove. I remembered him kicking my motorcycle. I remembered him calling my life's work trash. "You are not family, Tyler," I said softly. "You are a virus. And I just found the cure." I looked at the sergeant. "Get him out of here." The officers grabbed Tyler by the arms. He screamed as they hauled him up. He screamed as they slammed him against the hood of the cruiser. He screamed as the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. It wasn't a cry of sorrow. It was the cry of a narcissist who couldn't believe the world had dared to say no. As they shoved him into the back of the car, he locked eyes with me one last time through the glass. He didn't see a senile old man. He saw the mechanic. He saw the man who had dismantled him piece by piece, bolt by bolt, until there was nothing left but a shell. Harlan closed his briefcase. "Clean," he said. "The restraining order is already filed. Megan will be notified within the hour." Agent Miller nodded at me. "Good to see you, Cliff. We will need to do a site inventory just to be sure nothing was compromised, but I think your son-in-law was the only thing that got broken tonight." I watched the police cars pull away, their sirens fading into the night. The 2 thugs were in a separate van. Tyler was alone, just like he deserved to be. I turned to look at my warehouse. The lights from the remaining cruisers cast long shadows across the brick face. It stood tall and silent in the rain. My fortress. My legacy. It had held the line. "Let's go to the station, Harland," I said, turning back to my truck. "I have a daughter to save, and I want to be there when they read him the charges. I want to make sure he hears every single word." The fluorescent lights of the police precinct hummed with a sound that drilled straight into my temples. It was 2 a.m. The station smelled of stale coffee floor wax and the sour sweat of bad decisions. I sat on a hard plastic bench, my hands resting on my knees, watching the door. Harlan sat next to me, his briefcase open, sorting through a stack of papers with the dispassionate efficiency of a grim reaper organizing his list. We were not waiting for Tyler. Tyler was currently being processed in a holding cell, stripped of his belt, his shoelaces, and his dignity. We were waiting for the real victim of this tragedy. The double doors swung open, and Megan burst in. She looked frantic. Her hair was wet from the rain, her coat buttoned wrong. She scanned the room, her eyes wild until they landed on me. She didn't look relieved to see me safe. She looked furious. She marched across the linoleum floor, the sound of her heels echoing like gunshots. "Dad," she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "What have you done? The police said you had him arrested. They said you set him up. How could you? He is my husband." She stopped in front of me, her chest heaving. She looked at me, expecting to see the confused, shuffling old man she had been living with for the past month. She expected to see guilt. Instead, she saw me stand up. I didn't use the armrest for support. I didn't hunch my shoulders. I stood to my full height, looking her dead in the eye with a clarity she hadn't seen in weeks. "Sit down, Megan," I said. My voice was low, steady, and left no room for argument. She recoiled as if I had slapped her. "Dad, you are not—" "I am not senile," I finished for her. "And I am not the villain of this story. Sit down." She sank onto the bench opposite us, looking between me and Harland with confusion and fear. I nodded to the lawyer. Harland placed the stack of documents on the low table between us. It was a thick pile. It represented the autopsy of Tyler Reed's life. Mrs. Reed, Harland began, his tone professional, but not unkind. "I know you are here to post bail for your husband. The bail has been set at $500,000, given the flight risk and the severity of the federal charges." Megan gasped. $500,000. "We don't have that, but Tyler, he has assets. He has the company. We can call his investors." I reached out and placed my hand on the file. "There is no company, Megan. There are no investors." She shook her head violently. "That is a lie. I have seen the emails. I have seen the website." Harlan slid the first document across the table. It was a forensic accounting report. "Look at the dates, Megan. Look at the deposits. Or rather, the lack of them. The company is a shell. It was registered 3 years ago and has never filed a tax return because it has never made a single dollar of revenue. The only money moving through those accounts was from personal loans he took out in your name." "My name," she whispered, picking up the paper. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. Harlan slid the next paper over. "Credit card statements. 6 of them. All maxed out. All in your name, Megan. He forged your signature. He used your social security number. You are currently $150,000 in debt, and you didn't even know it." Megan stared at the numbers. The airline tickets, the hotels, the online gambling sites, the crypto exchanges. It was a catalog of waste, but that wasn't the worst of it. Harland reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small jeweler's loupe and a report from a pawn shop downtown. He placed them next to her hand. "Megan," I said gently, "let me see your ring." She clutched her left hand to her chest. "Why? What does my ring have to do with this? Just let me see it, honey." Reluctantly, she held out her hand. The diamond sparkled under the harsh station lights. It looked perfect. It looked expensive. Harlan picked up the report. He pawned the original stone 3 months ago, Harlan said softly. 2 days after you told him you wanted to try for a baby. He replaced it with a high-grade cubic zirconia and pocketed the $12,000. He gambled it away in 6 hours on a boxing match in Vegas. Megan looked at her ring, the symbol of her marriage, the promise of forever. It was a fake, just like him. A tear leaked out of her eye and tracked through the rain on her cheek. No, she whimpered. He wouldn't. He loves me. He is just under pressure. He was trying to build a future for us. I knew I had to deliver the final blow. I had to sever the limb to save the patient. I nodded to Harlan. He pulled out the final document. It was a contract. It was crumpled and stained with coffee recovered from Tyler's briefcase when he was booked. This is a letter of intent, Harlan explained. It is dated 3 days ago. It is a contract between Tyler Reed and a salvage company known for processing stolen industrial goods. Megan looked at the paper. She read the first paragraph. Then she stopped. Her breath hitched in her throat. He sold it. I said, my voice hard. He didn't just break in tonight to steal copper. He had already sold the contents of the warehouse. He sold my life's work, the machines that built this family, for pennies on the dollar. He signed a contract guaranteeing delivery by tomorrow morning. I leaned forward. Read the clause at the bottom, Megan. The one about the land. She read it. Her face went pale. He agreed to sign over the deed, but he doesn't have the deed. He was going to get it, I said. That was why he tried to have me declared incompetent. That was why he poisoned me, Megan. She looked up, and her eyes wide with horror. Poisoned. I pulled the toxicology report from my pocket and slammed it onto the table. Benzodiazepines and antihistamines. High doses. Found in my blood and found in the coffee he made me every morning. He wasn't taking care of me. He was chemically lobotomizing me so he could take my hand and force it to sign that paper. He was willing to turn your father into a vegetable so he could pay off his gambling debts. Megan stared at the report. She looked at the fake diamond on her finger. She looked at the mountain of debt in her name. The illusion she had built her life around didn't just crack. It shattered into a million razor-sharp pieces. She stood up. She walked to the trash can in the corner of the waiting room and vomited. I didn't go to her. I let her purge it. She needed to get the sickness out. When she turned around, she looked like a different person. The denial was gone. The hope was gone. All that was left was a raw, gaping wound. She walked back to the table and picked up the contract. She ripped it in half. Then she ripped it again. Where is he? She asked. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was cold. It sounded like me. He is in a cell, Harlan said. He is asking for you. He wants you to call his parents for bail money. Megan laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. His parents. They are broke too. They were counting on this sale just as much as he was. She looked at me. Dad, she whispered. I am so sorry. I didn't see it. I was so stupid. I stood up and opened my arms. She collapsed into them, sobbing into my flannel shirt. I held her tight, smelling the rain and the fear on her. I stroked her hair just like I did when she was a little girl and scraped her knee. You weren't stupid, I said into her hair. You were in love, and love makes you blind. But you are seeing now. That is all that matters. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. She looked at Harlan. Do I have to see him? She asked. No, Harlan said. I have the divorce papers drafted. You can sign them right now. You never have to speak to him again. I will handle the debt. Since it was fraud, we can get most of it discharged. But you have to testify. You have to tell them about the gas stove. You have to tell them about the lies. Megan nodded. She took the pen Harland offered. She didn't hesitate. She signed her name on the line. Megan Dalton. She left the read off. "Let's go home, Dad," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "Not yet," I said. "There is one more thing." I walked over to the sergeant at the desk. "I want to leave a message for the prisoner," I said. The sergeant looked up. "Sure." "What is the message? Tell him his bail has been denied," I said. "And tell him that his wife just left." She took the car keys, and she took her ring back. The sergeant smirked. "I will deliver it personally." I walked back to Megan. We walked out of the station into the night. The rain had stopped. The air was cold and clean. We got into my truck. I started the engine and the heavy rumble felt like a heartbeat. "We are going to be okay," Megan said, looking out the window. "Yes," I said, shifting into gear. "We are. But first we have a warehouse to clean. I think it is time I showed you what your inheritance actually looks like. It is not rust honey. It is iron. And it is stronger than anything he could ever break." The drive back to the house was silent, but it was the silence of a battlefield after the cannons have stopped firing. Megan stared out the window, watching the streetlights blur past her hand, unconsciously twisting the empty space on her finger where the fake diamond used to be. We pulled into the driveway, and the headlights swept across the front lawn. Harold's leased Mercedes was still there, parked crookedly, blocking the path to the garage. They were still here. They were still eating my food, drinking my wine, and sleeping in my guest room, while their son was being processed like a common criminal. I put the truck in park. "Stay here, Megan," I said. "I need to take out the trash one last time." I walked up the front steps. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped into the foyer. The house was in chaos. It wasn't the messy chaos of living. It was the organized chaos of looting. Harold and Linda were in the living room. They didn't hear me come in. Harold was grunting, his face red, as he tried to unhook my 65-inch television pole from the wall mount. Linda was at the sideboard, wrapping my late wife's silver candlesticks in a dish towel and stuffing them into a duffel bag. They weren't waiting for Tyler to come back with the millions. They were hedging their bets. They were stealing the furniture. "Careful with that mount, Harold," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a cold wind. "It is bolted into the studs. If you rip it out, you will damage the drywall." Harold dropped the corner of the TV. It smashed against the wall, cracking the screen. Linda screamed and dropped the silver. They both spun around, staring at me. They expected the shuffling, confused old man they had mocked at the barbecue. Instead, they saw me standing in the doorway, wet from the rain, my eyes clear and hard as flint. Cliff, Harold stammered. We were just moving this for safekeeping. We heard sirens. We were worried about looters." "Looters," I repeated, walking slowly into the room. "That is funny. The only looters I see are standing in my living room wearing my bathrobe." Linda stepped forward, trying to summon her usual haughty indignation. "How dare you sneak up on us? Where is Tyler? Why isn't he answering his phone?" "He went to close a deal." "The deal is closed, Linda," I said. "And so is the bank of Cliff Dalton. Tyler is currently in a federal holding cell. He is facing 20 years for breaking into a defense facility. And judging by the silver in your bag, you two are auditioning for the cell next to him." Linda's face went white. "That is a lie. Tyler is a businessman. He is a fraud," I snapped. "And so are you. You knew he was poisoning me. You knew he was trying to steal the deed. You sat at my table, ate my steak, and planned how to spend my money while I drooled in a cup." I walked past them to the hallway where their suitcases were stacked, ready for a quick getaway. I grabbed the handles. I didn't ask them to leave. I dragged their bags to the front door and threw them out onto the wet driveway. One suitcase burst open, spilling Linda's expensive creams and Harold's tacky silk shirts into the mud. "Get out," I said, pointing to the open door. Harold puffed up his chest, trying to be the big man one last time. "You can't evict us. We have rights. We are family." "You have 5 minutes," I said, checking my watch. "Agent Miller from the Department of Defense is very interested in the co-conspirators who helped Tyler plan the heist. He asked me to keep you here until he arrives, but I told him I would rather not have the stench in my house. So you have a choice. You can get in that leased Mercedes and drive until you run out of gas, or you can stay here and explain to the feds why you were stealing my silverware while your son was committing treason." Harold looked at Linda. Linda looked at the smashed TV. The reality of their situation crashed down on them. The game was over. The bluff was called. They didn't say another word. They ran. They grabbed their coats and scrambled out the door, tripping over their own luggage in the mud. I watched as they threw their clothes into the back seat of the Mercedes. I watched as Harold flooded the engine in his panic before finally getting it to start. I watched as they peeled out of my driveway, leaving tire marks on the asphalt, disappearing into the night like the roaches they were. I closed the front door. I locked the deadbolt. I turned around and looked at my living room. The TV was broken. The silver was scattered on the floor. But the air was clean. The parasites were gone. Megan walked in from the truck. She looked at the mess, then at me. "Are they gone?" she asked softly. I picked up the silver candlestick and placed it back on the sideboard. "Yeah, honey," I said. "They are gone, and they are never coming back. Why don't you put on a pot of coffee?" "Real coffee. I think we finally have the house to ourselves." 6 months have passed since the flashing lights faded from 4th Avenue. The rain has stopped, and summer has come to Seattle, but the real warmth comes from inside the warehouse. It is no longer silent. The air is filled with the hum of machinery, the smell of cutting oil, and the sound of industry. I am standing on the mezzanine looking down at the floor that Tyler thought was a graveyard. It is not a graveyard. It is a classroom. Megan is standing at the closing lathe, wearing blue coveralls that are 2 sizes too big and safety glasses that leave red marks on her nose. Her hands, once manicured and trembling with anxiety, are now stained with grease and steady as a rock. She is turning a piece of aluminum, shaving it down to within 1/1000th of an inch. She checks the caliper, frowns, adjusts the feed rate, and tries again. She doesn't look at her phone. She doesn't worry about what people think. She is focused on the work. Tyler is currently serving year 1 of a 20-year sentence at a federal correctional facility in Oregon. The divorce was finalized last week. He sent a letter begging for forgiveness, begging for money for the commissary. Megan didn't burn it. She didn't cry over it. She simply marked it. Returned to sender and dropped it in the mailbox on her way to work. She finally learned that you cannot fix a part that is broken at its core. You have to scrap it and move on. I walk down the stairs and stand behind her. She senses me but doesn't flinch. She finishes the cut and turns off the spindle. She holds up the shiny, perfectly machined cylinder. "How is that, Dad?" she asks. I take it. I measure it. "It is perfect." "It is good," I say. "But why did you slow down on the final pass?" "I didn't want to ruin it," she admits. "I was scared of taking too much off." I hand the part back to her. That is the lesson, Megan. Fear makes you hesitate, and hesitation ruins the finish. You have to trust your hands. You have to trust the machine. She looks at the metal in her palm. It is heavy. It is real. Tyler wanted this place for the land, she says softly. He wanted to bulldoze it and sell the dirt. He never understood what we actually do here. I put my hand on her shoulder. Tyler thought wealth was something you steal or inherit. He thought it was a number on a screen. He didn't understand that this— I gesture to the lathe, to the tools, to the shop floor. This is the only real wealth. What the machines know, I say. The skill, the ability to take a raw, ugly piece of metal and turn it into something useful, something that works. That is the one asset that no bank can foreclose on, no lawyer can sue for, and no husband can steal. If you know how to build, you will never be poor. If you know how to work, you will never be powerless. Megan smiles. It is a real smile, not the polite mask she used to wear. She puts the part on the rack next to the others. Teach me how to thread the next one, she says. I nod. Load it up. As I watch my daughter tighten the chuck, I realize that the rusty fortress wasn't protecting the machines. It was protecting this moment. It was waiting for the right person to inherit the keys. Not the brass keys to the gate, but the keys to a life of dignity. My name is Cliff Dalton. I am a mechanic, a father, and a survivor. And if there is one thing I have learned from 40 years of turning wrenches and fighting rats, it is this. The world is full of people who want to sell you a dream. But the only dreams that last are the ones you build with your own two hands. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to rebuild your life from the scrap heap, tell me about it in the comments. And remember, keep your tools sharp, keep your circle small, and never ever let anyone tell you that your hard work is just rust. See you in the next story.